acquisition policy.
That's half of Bitcoin acquisition policy. So we do that, and doesn't matter if it's whatever excess in that day end we have, we go ahead and park it into Bitcoin. The stack is not substantial right now. 21 is a good number, but we want to scale it up. We want to scale it up quite aggressively. We're aiming to go to about more than 10 by December of this year. We'll be doing another fundraiser round, which is ongoing. In September is when it will close. Then we'll deploy everything again into Bitcoin, and then eventually in the next year I want to see if we can reach about 2,100 Bitcoin, and that will be again through a flywheel effect. We use all the possible instruments that we can in the Indian Bombay Stock Exchange, National Stock Exchange, whichever stock exchange is allowing us to raise capital, we go ahead and raise capital there. This is all public data. We own about 51% of the business. We are okay to go down to even 50% of that, or even more if it's required. As long as we are able to stack stats in our balance sheet, we are okay to dilute our position, our holding in the business. I think Bitcoin is going through this entire institutionalization, like we know. I mentioned this briefly before. 2010 से लेकर 2020 तक, it was driven by the community. 2020 से लेकर 2030 तक, it will be driven by corporations and companies. And from 30 onwards, there will be countries who will be adopting it and possibly at some stage create it as their collateral. Yeah, so hyper adoption would take time. I think this is a matter like for India also to, for example, come in. So I think it will open up. Even India will open up. There's no thing they cannot. I don't think that ban. So yeah, that's been my journey so far, and it's good to have something like this in the Indian stock market. So like Sailor says it, even we were at the end of our business, right? So because we suffered about 8-9 crores worth of losses in that year of COVID that year, and it was how Sailor puts it that it's a need to know asset. Like when you don't know what else is there, then you go to Bitcoin. Right, so that's what we did, and so far the journey's been good. The brand Jetking, if people knew this before 2010, it was a sexy brand. It was the brand for IT training. It had a lot of awards that it had received, and it had done credible business at that stage. We intend to do that same piece for us with Bitcoin, and a lot of times there are questions around the fact that then what happens if some compliance goes down or Bitcoin gets hacked. I think we've taken all measures possible that all Bitcoin treasury companies are taking globally to make sure that the Bitcoin remains intact. It's not kept on exchanges. It's in self-custody, moving into institutional custody once it gets substantial. My first intention is to keep it as self-custody as possible, because ultimately the risk with a lot of third party is imminent at some stage. So we are finding ways to make sure that the self-custody piece is also sorted out properly, and I think the flywheel effect will keep moving forward, going ahead, and I think the community here. So I told Amol also, I'm very happy to host this with everyone talking about Bitcoin every last Sunday of every month. We can gather up, have a conversation, spend some time here, and see what's happening in different places, in different experiences. And yeah, it's exciting time, man. It's going to be good, and I wish to give Modi some Bitcoin. And I think that should open up, or even have it in Bharatiya Janata Party treasury or something like this. But the hope is that I'll be there. Thank you.
How is it Suril Desai sir to explain about the legal aspects of Bitcoin? And there are presentations to be mentioned.
Good afternoon. There are different stages of the whole evolution of regulation and the attitude towards regulation, right? And Bitcoin first came out around, I got involved in it in 2012, but I was involved in the decentralization movement since the year 2000. So I was studying in California, I was doing my undergrad over there, And that time, internet was just, you had Napster, you had DC++, you had ICQ, I don't know if you remember that. And you had MRC, chats, and all these things. It was very decentralized. I mean, people don't realize internet started out decentralized, and now it's become centralized with Googles and Facebooks. And this idea of decentralization needs to be understood, right? Because when I got introduced to decentralization, I only thought of it as related to computers and computing power and the University of Berkeley. And what they were using this computing power was to power another supercomputer, which was detecting radio frequencies in outer space. So SETI is search for extraterrestrial intelligence. And I was like, wow, this is something totally interesting, and I could understand because I'm not a computer science student, I'm not a finance student. I'm the last person to talk about anything remotely related to finance or computing. In 2006, I came back to India and I started my law school here. And that time, 2006 and then 2008 financial crisis happened. And then I got involved in the Occupy Wall Street protests also. I was observing them. I didn't get involved, but just reading up on them. Maybe I did. And in that Occupy Wall Street movement, all these professors from Yale, from Cornell, all these Ivy League schools, all these people all these professors came out and started saying that we have this, white paper which is coming out, and then it came out, and I wasn't aware of it. I got aware of it in 2011. By then I had already started researching, and before I got into the SETI program, I was researching privatization of space exploration. This was in 2003, 2002. And I continued with that, and I was doing my research in my college on this subject. And then one of my colleagues told me that look at Bitcoin. And then I saw it and I was like, oh my god, this is a complete disruptor, right? And it disrupted the status quo, right? And at that time, Bitcoin was only thing we read about Bitcoin was the dark web, Silk Route, and all those kind of stories were only coming out. And it's used for nefarious purposes. It's used by all the criminals. It's used by rogue nations and stuff like that, which had some credibility to it because there are a lot of bad players in the game. I won't say that. But that was the attitude, right? And now you look at this, and now when you come back, fast forward to now, look at the attitude. It's like now governments want. So Bitcoin, you have to understand, is a movement. It's a revolution, and it has been going on, and now it's gaining mass adoption. And people are realizing that there is an alternative system to the current existing economic system that we have. And one of the solutions is the idea of this, decentralized, permission-free, permissionless, censorship-resistant. All of these things are proving to be true for Bitcoin. And even in India, when we started, in 2000, the first time as a law firm, we came to the rescue of the crypto community was in 2013. On Christmas Eve that year, RBI came out with a notification saying that, people should not play with Bitcoin and they should stay away from it, and because it's very volatile and all those kind of reasons. They didn't say that, but Enforcement Directorate, as a result of that notification, went and raided all the Bitcoin players at that time, and and literally a month, 15 days before the notification, there was a Bitcoin conference in Bangalore, where even the people from RBI had come, and there was some 300-400 people at that. So it was a 2-day conference, and then I met the organizers, and they came to my office, and we were talking about writing a paper and representing Bitcoin to the government and sending it to them. But then this notification came and these guys were stalled, and they all collectively came to us and they told us that we can make a representation and if we can ask the government to form a committee and all those things. But we realized that if you go to the government to tell them to form a committee and then come out with a recommendation or whatever policy or something, it's a long drawn process. It's almost, they'll take 6-7 months just to read it, and then after that they'll take another 6-7 months to form a committee. So you're almost wasting 1.5 to 2 years. So we said, let's take the bull by its horn. So we decided, we had briefed my father, and he understood it, and he was game on Bitcoin like since the minute I told him. And he said, let's do something different. So we got a press conference. We invited all CNBC, CTV, Economic Times, all the major press of India, and we invited the Bitcoin players, and the Bitcoin guys came and explained the technology, which, you know, they were very transparent about their discussions. And then at the end of that speech, my father, he had briefed he got $10 well because of that project, and he came and made a statement: Bitcoin is not illegal per se, but ordinary people should be careful because it's very volatile and it poses a lot of threats, you know, to the, so it can go one day 100,000, the next day it can go down to 0. We've seen those 99% drops in the past. And but it, you know, but you can't, it's not illegal. And that headline was carried out by Business Standards and Yahoo and all the top applications and online and stuff like that. And next day the crypto exchanges were back up and running. And then we get a call from ED. They say, "Bhai sahab, ye Bitcoin kya cheez hai?" And then we went and we made a presentation to the ED. We explained to them, and at that time they were like, you know, इसके लिए तो 10 साल का सजा हो जाएगा, you know, 10 years imprisonment for owning a Bitcoin. That was a part of the committee report, recommendation, not policy. And then we went and met the finance ministry and explained to them. And then between 2014 and 2016, it was going quite smoothly, except that there was this one major scam which was gain Bitcoin coming out of it. And that got the eye of the Reserve Bank. And Reserve Bank again came out with a notification telling the banks not to operate. In 2018, they told the banks not to operate the accounts of crypto exchanges and put a banking ban of sorts on crypto players. And then again, the industry was still, it was not that mature at that time also, right? I mean, to get them all together and who would file it. We had Coin, we had Zepay, CoinDCX was there, I think, in that. Coin Switch was there. And one more, I don't know.
Coin.
Bazeera. And all of them came together and they formed a, so IMAI, which is Internet and Mobile Association of India, created a special interest group focusing on blockchain and Bitcoin. And that in turn was the one which we filed a petition on the basis of that group, and we filed a petition in 2018, and that case we practically fought for we couldn't build them. We were too young to be built, and obviously you have to take on the Reserve Bank will quite a mammoth task. So we filed it, and then 2 years later, in 2020, we got the judgment. Like the Supreme Court, if you read the Supreme Court judgment, I think you all should read that because it's there online. They give you like what the Supreme Court thinks of it, right? And Supreme Court, if you read the first few pages, you think that they're coming completely anti-crypto, but towards the end of the judgment, they just flip, you know, and then they say that, you know, RBI cannot ban Bitcoin, it can only regulate it. And banning Bitcoin, putting this banking ban is too prohibitive, it's too extreme a move. And that came out on March 4th, 2020. And like me and some of my friends, we celebrate that as the Bitcoin Liberation Day in India. And won the case, and then the bull run started, and the bull run has been going on. And now, I don't know what kind of a policy the government is thinking of coming out with. Because they couldn't ban it, they taxed it heavily. Because they feel very threatened by this new technology, right? Because Bitcoin is a political movement. You know, nobody admits it, but it's a quasi-political movement. And it's like in 2015 I was interviewed by Coin Telegraph, in which I've said that there'll be a cyber war for Bitcoins, and we are headed towards that kind of a. That's why every nation wants to have a strategic reserve, right? And I think I'm hopeful that this time around the government, when they come out with their policy, they come out with something that supports this ecosystem. Because if it doesn't, I think India's IT shine will just fade away like it has never happened before. So it's very important for the government to, really be pro crypto and pro Bitcoin. So that's my 2 cents.
If anyone has any questions for Suril regarding legal aspects of Bitcoin.
See, right now there are very limited instruments that treasury companies can use.
Yeah.
So, what sort of consultation when you meet all these companies who are trying to, like Jetking or other new companies which are trying to do something like this? What sort of guidance do you give? Do you foresee that there could be changes in capital markets for more?
Oh yeah, I mean, I think the entire ecosystem of finance is changing. It's like you'll get newer every day there's a new instrument created for trading. Right? Like if you look at your meme coins and crypto, I'm connecting it to crypto, the rate at which new coins are being generated, they are nothing but different means, right? They are different mediums of wealth transfer. And you have the whole derivatives market, crypto derivatives are there. So there are so many instruments you can use, it's like you are spoiled by the choice of plenty. And to choose the right instrument would depend on what your attitude towards Bitcoin itself is, right? Are you going to be like, you're going to buy and hold like Jetking, or you're going to buy, sell, and trade, or so depending on what your strategy is, your instrument will be determined by that.
He earlier mentioned that in India there are very limited instruments, capital instruments available. Do you foresee new kinds of instruments?
Oh yeah, there will. New instruments, they will have to. Because I think that it's like Bitcoin itself is a new instrument, and smart contracts, and on top of it AI, and then you have quantum, and so traditional trading is going to become very different from what we've seen and observed, right? Like with things like UPI and all, you can just do it instantly. You have companies like Resolute, Strike, and all of those guys who are, you have stable coins, and on stable coins you can build smart contracts, which will again be so smart contracts are coming in a big way. So
Even for companies to raise funds?
I'm not too sure about that, but for raising funds, it's a story, like it's how well you tell your story.
And whatever you're allowed to do eventually, right? So even these preferred stocks, for example, what Michael Saylor did, there was nothing known as perpetual preferred stock.
Yeah.
In the American capital markets for the last 150, 200 years, there was nothing like that. He created it. So ultimately, even like how Bitcoin was created, these instruments will have to be created by different creative ways of doing it. Even Metaplanet, for example, these moving strike borders that he has right now, it was an instrument that you could use, but no one had tapped into it for 50 years in Japan. But he looked at it and he got his Bitcoin engineering plugged into that system. So the idea is how creative can you get, and eventually once the regulations open up, then you can start getting creative.
And will it also require warming up the capital markets and telling them and making them receptive to these, or just telling your story is sufficient? You don't really care about warming them up.
So I think you have to make it happen. So there's no one. They're not sitting with like a menu saying that this is all you can do. So you have to, as companies, as people, as investors, you have to go to them and say, this is what we want to do. If it is falling by the book, then you can go ahead and execute it. I think that there are reasonable people there. They're not unreasonable. Like even when we did our pref issue, they had some questions around it, but once they was explained, it was all moved forward, right? And it was just linking our simple equity to Bitcoin, that we are raising capital for Bitcoin, and it ultimately sailed through. So my point is that as long as you have the good rationale and good rapport built up with them, they should not, they'll move it forward.
Are we coming out with those kind of
Sorry?
preferential stocks?
It's a little far out. So the idea is to keep it as simple as possible in the beginning. And the second fundraise is also that we are doing is an equity-based fundraise. And once that is through, so you try all the instruments and then go to scale, right? So there will so as soon as Sailor adopted it, there was Tesla who got some as well, and then there was multiple companies. Block did it, and SpaceX did it. So there needs to be, I know 2 other companies that are coming up in the Indian stock market who are doing it, and there should be 50 more, there should be 100 more. So everyone is making the same sound, and if they are making the same sound, then these guys will have to listen, right? So, I mean, if you're part of a publicly listed company, I'm very happy to come by and speak to your board and say, okay, let's start this process of buying Bitcoin on your balance sheet. But my point is that there has to be a lot more corporates. Like, I mean, we singularly will not be able to make enough noise, right? Because then it comes as a bias. But if there's hundreds of us talking about it, it will have a different impact altogether.
Siddharth, one question. I know it's very early, but will we get proof of results for?
Yeah. Once it gets substantial, we publish everything. Abhi 21 आपको ज़्यादा होएगा उससे 21 Bitcoin proof of, I mean our addresses are live, our auditors have seen it, they can look at the wallets, but we will display everything as well basis.
What kind of asset is it shown on the balance sheet? Like what?
Intangible asset.
I had a question, sir. In the case the price of Bitcoin goes down, and with the current Indian judiciary system that we have, is it possible that you'll face some kind of lawsuit from your shareholders saying that you destroyed their value?
Activist shareholders.
Fiduciary duty, like.
But
yeah.
they have already made the statements,
yeah.
they have made the disclosures.
Huh.
So, and the activists can't say, if you look at their balance sheet and all that, you'll find that they have completely disclosed that we are pivoting to a Bitcoin's only company, right? And it's known to them. So,
but does the government recognize it as like a strategy that you can do it? Like
So
you were a
ultimately
company who was doing something else, but you can do this. Like
So
you can be an investor.
So we've changed our memorandum of articles, like everything is changed 100%. We can do 3 businesses. Earlier there was only 2. First was education and skill development. The other one was rental business. And now we've added the 3rd one. We have an approval for it, and now our new MOA shows that these are the 3 main object clause of this company. One of them is to buy and hold Bitcoin.
Yeah.
So ultimately, those disclosures will also be made in our next annual report, which we are saying that we are a Bitcoin treasury company. Now,
And you're confident that the judiciary system.
no, I mean tomorrow you find so Michael Saylor is going through a lawsuit right now. There's been 2 class action lawsuits on him. So when it
But I
comes,
guess-
Vishal Bhai, Suril Bhai will take care of it. What else? I mean, I have to keep buying Bitcoin.
Also on the flip side, right, if a person has direct exposure to Bitcoin, in India, you're paying a high capital gains tax if you ever sell it.
Yeah.
But if you go through these indirect means, like for example, MicroStrategy, Jetking, or anyone that has it and their balance sheets, it's a traditional finance asset at the end of the day. So you're offsetting yourself from that kind of risk in this environment.
Yeah.
Am I right about that, sir?
Yeah.
Right? So in that sense, you're still getting the exposure, but without the risk of having to keep custody or having to worry about like massive price swings where you have to pay 30% without any offsets.
I'm always worried about the government making new rules up.
Doesn't
So
matter
there was
with
this
Bitcoin.
arbitrage with the fixed deposits and the money some kind of short debt funds.
Yeah.
Like you could pay a lower tax rate when you buy debt funds than what you would pay if you bought if you took out an FD. So that they close that gap out. They always like find a gap and then they close it out the next time. So the next year they made a rule where it became the same.
That's precisely why this instrument was created in 2008, because we were sick and tired of different rules being created to sort of leech off humanity.
No, sir, ultimately there can be those cases. I mean, आप मत कर देना कोई case. मतलब, no, I'm joking on a lighter note, but I'm saying there can be, you know. So there is the guys who did it right now also in strategies that they said they did not make some disclosures back in 2020 when they started off, and then they had some adjustments in their books. But ultimately you have to, that's the cost of doing business, right, in a gray area. And if we are doing that, that's the cost of doing business, and we'll see how it comes.
What does every public company have to make a change in the memorandum to be able to buy and hold Bitcoin, or is it just like, that seems like a lot of work?
We decided to do it. We decided to do it because we wanted it to be our main business, and maybe a year or 2 years down the line, there will be a lot of so we are building out a Bitcoin learning system. We want to teach people on Bitcoin, partner up with people who are teaching Bitcoin. So Bitcoin as an asset, we want to make it our main business clause per se. But it's dependent on what they are up to and what they would want to do. But I don't know if it's mandatory or if it's, mandatory, but we wanted to take that.
I think if you are a publicly listed company, you have to.
Because
Okay.
to start
You
with,
just
you
like-
don't even know whether Bitcoin is categorized as a currency, as an asset, as a commodity.
Hmm.
The world is still evolving. So to make it amply clear, if you bringing it out onto their memorandum of association that my object clause is dealing in Bitcoin or investing in Bitcoin, I mean it's much more better than
Yeah.
being silent about it, right? To say that I'll be investing in various forms.
I'm just saying that if you're a public company and you're allocating your excess capital to a store of value asset, you shouldn't have to make, like, any business doesn't have to make a change in the memorandum. That seems like a lot.
No, the risk is of shareholders
Yeah.
knowing the
It's a
Exactly.
precautionary measure.
And ultimately, in our case, the raw material that we are going to use going forward is equity, right? So ultimately, this is an engine or the flywheel that we are creating to raise capital to buy Bitcoin, which is the playbook that we are following. So ultimately, you want to keep it as clear as possible, so that there's no ambiguity that you cannot do it. It's in your ancillary object clause. So you would want to keep it as clear.
But,
there is some safety in getting users or investors on your side. For example, when Uber and Airbnb came to the country, they got a lot of drivers onboarded, and once they had that reach, medallion operators.
Yeah,
or
so I mean,
government-
there is this thing called regulatory entrepreneurship.
Yeah.
You should read that paper. It's really interesting. It talks about companies like Airbnb, Uber, Amazon, and you know how they were working on the edges of law, right? And they took regulatory as arbitrage. Regulation was the arbitrage, right? And so when Uber was started out, they started out in somewhere in New York, and the community of people who are using Uber along with the drivers became their strongest lobby.
Yeah.
So their cost of hiring lawyers to go and fight for them in Washington DC and things like that was, offset by these guys. I mean, obviously they had to use them, but so Uber in its business plan had provided in its initial business. I mean, when they were really I think 700 million. They had allocated some $500 million for legal expenses. That means paying of fines, parking tickets, all of that, and then fighting the unions, and then you had, are they employees or not employees, those kind of issues. So they had provided. So Uber, when it was a $2 billion company or something, that's when they allocated 500 million to legal expenses. Because, I mean, it's, as a lawyer, I mean, that's the biggest expense that any business has, right? And if your legals are not in place, then, I mean, it's like a life jacket on you, right? When you go on a boat and you don't know how to swim, you wear a life jacket. So you need to have very governance, well-articulated policies for whatever you do when you do it with crypto. And
but Bitcoin is going to be that layer of trust, and that's what we are headed towards. But it should be easy to orange pill a orange nation, right?
You would think so. You would hope so.
Yeah.
What is your view on Bitcoin denominated convertible debt, which the blockchain group has recently been doing? So I think that's a good way to accumulate more and more Bitcoin yield. As you were saying that in Indian markets it's pretty hard to raise money and get Bitcoin.
So it's not pretty hard. What I meant was it's a slow-moving process. There is a lot of interest in this business, but a lot of people don't want to associate with Bitcoin right now. That's because it has that negativity umbrella at this stage. So like a policy document possibly will help exactly clear out, and then you'll see a lot of funds coming in. Ultimately, when I'm doing a Bitcoin-backed instrument, I'm using Bitcoin as transaction. I ideally should not be doing that. I have to acquire through INR, and that's how it's laid out in an FIU note when I'm doing it from an exchange. Ideally, I want to keep it as straightforward as possible and not complicate things, because these things are moving very fast in the West. So like what Sailor is doing, what Metaplan is doing, what blockchain group is doing, that market is way more mature for Bitcoin as an asset. Wherein for us, we're just coming out from this whole negativity around Bitcoin. So my point is that if we are able to do it eventually, we will. And the idea was to just make sure that the first few instruments are straightforward so that they fly through, and then take it from there. So it's all in moving parts.
I think non-institutional debt wouldn't be a problem either way, right? At this point at least. Because
Yeah.
I'm sure like if you take debt from bank, obviously they have more regulatory hurdles. But
Yeah.
non-institutional personal level debt, even from a perspective of a publicly traded company, wouldn't be a problem.
Not a problem. I mean,
Right.
it's just a
Because the
high
prejudice
interest.
of the people.
It's a high interest. Capital here is costly, right? In India,
Yeah.
compared to Japan, it's free capital for them.
Right.
And it depends on what instruments we want to use at what stage. So
Right.
our early, at least till up until December, is all going to be equity instruments and convertible to equity. And then at a later stage, when there is some more clarity, hoping that this document comes out next month, then we'll be able to see what all we can do together
Right.
in that document.
Any reason why the equity raise was private?
It was kind of like a trial and error. We did not know if we would get rejected. So earlier, what we were going to do in our so you have to explain to them where the use of funds is, right? Earlier, we were thinking that we'll show it as a Bitcoin education initiative, but then we decided when we sat down, we decided that the right thing to do is that if you're raising capital for Bitcoin, we say we are doing this. So we narrated that in our use of funds, and we were not sure if it gets rejected, then if the capital commitment was large and if it was too many people, then it would have that sense of like it would have that rejection. So we said let's just go small this time, get this out of the way, clear it the fact that we are raising capital to buy Bitcoin, and then take it from there. So it was whatever was in our network at that stage to start the process, we went ahead and did it, and now we are opening it up to a larger audience.
In terms of the negative umbrella that you mentioned and the upcoming policy documents, has the government or the bureaucrats reached out for any inputs to anyone in the industry?
At least not to me. Maybe Nishit Bhai or someone they must have, but not to me. I mean, there's not, because ultimately they have enough brain power in these places, right? They have enough of that. The only thing is that the utility of it has not come out on table. So they will come out with that document, but I mean, in what category and what class, I don't know. But when it does, I mean, I'm eager as well to know what comes next.
Do you have published any playbook? You have done it, what other companies can use? Something?
I think the playbook is the Sailor playbook. Yeah, I mean it's pretty much everywhere across X, YouTube. The more time you spend on his videos, he narrates it very well. I mean, I've had sleepless nights looking at his videos, hours after hours after hours, and whatever you can adapt from there. And we publish pretty much everything transparently. Like these documents are all on our website. Our annual report, our disclosures, everything is open-ended. It's not a published playbook. Go do this. But it is whatever move we are doing, for example, is published on our website, and all the information is available for people to look at how we want to do it. Say for example, this was one question that a lot of people had about the main object clause. So we went ahead and said we are changing it. Now people who want to adapt to that should adapt to that.
You also use the cash flow from the education.
Yep. So we have a policy internally. So we'll just maintain 15% of our top line at all times as working capital. Everything else will be in Bitcoin. And the fact that, say for example, this kind of real estate, a lot of the other real estate that we've had, we put it on sale to buy Bitcoin. So, koi hai kharidne wala? Anyone wants to buy this?
I don't think
Anyone, right? Anyone, if anyone has good real estate connects who can accelerate this, huh?
You don't want to buy, that's why we are
But that can help me accelerate real estate sale with some. On my ex, I had shown the return I got on these 2 properties that we are looking. We sold already, and it was disheartening to see that. But yeah, if anyone has good real estate contacts to sell larger blocks, also faster, accelerated for me, would be very helpful.
That got a very good price into it.
Huh?
That got a very good price
Response,
into it.
yeah.
Response into it.
Are you safeguarded against Bitcoin hacking?
So right now it's in self-custody, and Bitcoin network has never been hacked per se. So there is no, so the exchanges get hacked. So so within 30 minutes of buying, we remove it from the exchange, and it's in self-custody right now. And eventually we'll move this into, once the number goes to about 100 plus, we'll move it into institution custody.
So you're not using third-party custody right now?
Not right now.
What is the institutional custody in India?
So there is Liminal right now who operates. So Liminal was Wazir X custodian as well, but that's one. The only thing with them is that they are FIU compliant, and they are the only. So in America they have this thing of Coinbase and Fidelity being qualified custodians, and then ideally a publicly listed company should be working with qualified custodians. And ultimately, that's what we want to do. But besides Liminal, there's no one else coming in. I know some CoinSwitch is doing some work, and as soon as they are FIU compliant, we evaluate that and move it there.
What if you buy ETFs? I mean, some pure Bitcoin.
I don't want to buy ETFs, I only want to buy Bitcoin. It's the same, why don't I buy Solana, or why don't I... ETFs is... No, so it's only Bitcoin forever, man. Like, I mean, there is no chance. Why should I buy an ETF when I can buy Bitcoin? I mean, there can be, like, there's a few companies coming out as virtual digital asset treasury, but that's their thought process. I mean, we had Ethereum, for example, I said it earlier, we had about 88 or 100 Ethereum on our balance sheet. And when we started doing this, we were doing virtual digital asset investment policy. That's what we started off with in 2022. But then in 2024, we took that 100% pivot into Bitcoin. And if I can own Bitcoin, why should I own ETFs?
And does this not centralization of, like, ultimately for government confiscation, because like gold they confiscated.
Right.
Like ultimate playbook might be that like
For
government
them.
can confiscate from the Coinbase and all those things. So we have to.
So that is a risk you carry. I mean, tomorrow if a government has to go ahead and
The later point.
cut something down and confiscate something, I mean, you can't really fight that. But I think confiscating it will come in when you're doing something wrong with it. I think.
No, at later point, some point, maybe government, like US government also, they have allowed all those things.
Right.
So
No,
at
but
later
Bitcoin has
point,
become
like
too
the
big
gold
to fail now.
confiscated, At that time, later point it can come.
No, but it's
What's
become
the
too big to
question?
fail.
Yeah.
No, I think what he means to say is what would be recourse in case of government intrusion
I mean, if
into
they-
regulatory framework.
I mean, if governments will always do that, right? They're always on the, who's representing them, like, because now Bitcoin treasury companies will start having significant influence on the governments, like BlackRock, right? I mean, is the government going to fight BlackRock? I mean, if they want to, they are welcome, but
They are BlackRock.
So basically, I think he's drawing parallels to USA confiscating gold back in the day.
Yes, exactly.
And I think that
But
is a
gold-
counterparty risk that we are willing to accept for the higher returns that treasury companies generate. But, it's better to hold your own.
And even if they want, they can take it from the blockchain. They will not get it
Yeah, they will not get it from the.
So how does self-custody work at a company level? Like, do you have a multi-sig with all the board of directors, or is it just 3 people who are responsible for it? And how do you like mitigate the risk of the person just running away with the Bitcoin or something?
So it's 2 board members, 1 accounts person and 1 auditor, who have to sanction anything. But we don't remove the Bitcoin. There's only inflow. There's no outflow of the Bitcoin. So we don't have to access the outflow per se. We've laid out a policy document which, besides that, no one can access anything there. There's a vault system that we set up, which is at this stage is not known to anyone beyond like 3 or 4 people, including auditors. And at one point, we'll start publishing our wallet address when again the stack becomes substantial, and all of that will be shared on our annual report once it's audited from our auditors.
I guess the easiest step would be to have like collaborative custody with an institution where they only hold 1 key. And so at least you know like they are not going to collude with these two guys, right?
I mean
facilitates that.
The risk is both ways. I think even if you have it with an institution custody tomorrow, if they do collude, what do you do? So ideally you want to keep it in self and then take it from there. I want to keep it self as long as I can,